Right, going to live up to that for you now. Okay, so what I'd like to talk with you about today is operability. And it's a real passion of mine because I'm a system build engineer now, so a deployment monkey or a DevOps evangelist, depending on who you ask. But I've got quite a background in support and ops. So the ops end of things is very close to my heart and I'm always thinking about it. Something I've noticed recently, and also it was identified time and time again at DevOps Days this year as well, is that we're doing not DevOps so well, we're doing dev very well, we're doing dev platform very well. We're not necessarily thinking enough about... That's not good. It's because I tapped that with my foot and it's gone on. Okay. I could keep talking. I'll keep talking. It's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Can you tap it?
So I'm going to forward it anyway. Yeah, exactly. So, how many of you were here? It was Atelier before last, maybe, when I got the chance to talk to you all about DevOps a bit. I did one called Testing as DevOps. Cool. All right. Well, I'll try really hard not to duplicate too much. I know Sophie's going to talk to you in much more depth about DevOps culture and ethos in a few minutes. So all I'm going to do is very, very, very quickly talk you through enough DevOpsiness. enough DevOpsiness to put some context around my talk. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to give you some of the goodness, and you're going to be excited as that pooch by the time I finish. Okay, go, right. So I'm going to talk you through the calms first. Have you ever heard of the DevOps calms? Right, so the C for calms is culture, and it's about enabling people to do awesome stuff in many ways, empowerment, it's auto-forwarding, okay. Empowering people to collaborate and have freedom to work in a positive way. Automation. This is where you get a pink fluffy DevOps unicorn. It takes all your components and sticks them into live for you, no problem. No. So automation is often the biggest piece of work. It's almost as much work when you first set it up as, I don't know why it's auto-forwarding. As actually developing the product itself. But once you've got a pipeline there that's going to deliver your stuff fully tested into live, you're golden. Automation, very important. You're automating all the boring stuff that humans don't want to do so the humans can do the awesome creative stuff. Lean. Lean is all the principles that we've nicked from the automotive industry mainly. And one of the main things that we have stolen is having very small batch sizes, so we're committing really quickly so that we don't forget what it was we were doing on Friday evening. Monitoring. How awesome is it? Awesome, hopefully. But when it isn't, we'll be able to see and we'll be able to respond accordingly. And we'll always get this continuous feedback about how our products are working. Sharing. Communicate, learn, shout about what we've learned. And be really, really honest. Enable people to have the freedom to be honest. And that's awesome as well. Okay, so that's the calms model. 3 ways is the bit that I like best, and that's what I talked to you guys about at a previous atelier. So the first way is having a view of your entire system, caring about all of it, not necessarily doing everything yourself, of course, but caring about all of it. And always making sure you don't pass a problem to a downstream workstation or team in this case. And also having an awareness that if there's a constraint or a blocker somewhere in your system, then any improvement you make outside of that is just an illusion, really. Second one is all of that, but you've got a feedback loop all the time. And the third one is all of that, but you've got this continual culture of experimentation and learning. So you're giving people the time and the motivation to keep learning the whole time. So I've turned that into 3 sort of personalities or characters. I find that quite useful. So the first way, when you've got the view of the whole system, is your gods. The second way, when you've got feedback loops with reporters. And the third way is geniuses. So the first way, yeah, you're God, you care about the whole system. Second way, you're obsessed about getting all the information and making sure it's in the right hands at the right time and everybody understands it. And the third way, you're just absolutely compelled to keep experimenting and learning and improving. So, on to operability. I managed to get through all of DevOps in 5 minutes, pretty good. So, down to brass tacks. Like I said to you before, I don't think in DevOps we're doing the ops bit very well. And like I said to you on the previous occasion, I believe that testers are the people that can take an ethos like DevOps and actually make it happen in the real world. First of all, what I want to do is look at what's going wrong, because we can easily put out something that passes all its software tests. Because am I right in thinking that most of you as test professionals work more closely with devs rather than ops? Yeah? Yeah, that's the same at TransUnion. And so we're very, very good at collaborating at that end of your delivery stream. This is about, so you can get something that actually is going to be a little bit inoperable, passing all the tests and meeting all the requirements, going out there, and then we kind of forget about it, and ops are just like, seriously. And the problems might be just that there's new technologies in there that are unfamiliar. It might be that there's something building up on your servers over time that needs sorting out. We'll have a look at it anyway. Like I said with the 3 ways, here we're trying to get a view of the whole system, including ops. You don't have to become like an operational specialist tester. Maybe you'd like to do that. It would be a really good thing to do. But what you do need to do is, if you've got this awareness of operability and you've always got your eye on it, then you can flag it to the right people who do need to be testing it and making sure that it's in place. So I nicked this from one of our chief officers this week. He was flagging up operability as being the thing that we really need to concentrate on now. Like he said, we can have fantastic sales, management, products, pricing, everything, but if we deliver all those requirements into live and the service itself is not 100% reliable, or we can't deal with requests and incidents really quickly, the customers are not going to be happy. Doesn't matter what else we do right. So, I asked around at work and got some quotations from some of my colleagues about what they thought was going wrong or could go wrong in operability. And absolutely nailed it here. Dev teams do get something operating beautifully. It meets all the requirements. They then deliver it beautifully down the pipeline, automated, all the testing's going right. And then, right, it's in live. That is the definition of done, and walk away from it. We do have escrow sometimes with some customer deliveries, things like that. So we do have, maintenance periods. But we've recognised that we concentrate so much on functional requirements, we're not necessarily looking at the non-functional ones. We're not devoting enough resources to a product once it's in live. And also the difference between something that's deliverable, i.e. it meets all those customer requirements, and operable. So, this is another problem that we have with operability. We create something that's really clever. We're dead pleased with it. We've used this new technology to create this product. And yeah, maybe we've over-engineered it, maybe we've not passed the right information on to ops. But yeah, just like Dave, who's created a homemade megaphone using only some string, a squirrel and a megaphone, we might have introduced more complexity, which is going to increase our time to resolution on the incident or something like that. Or it might just make it more difficult to configure the product. Or it might require extra resources to run it on a day-to-day basis that's not really necessary. Compute power is going to cost the company quite a lot of money and have knock-on effects elsewhere. So, metrics. That's what this slide's about. Do you know what's happening? Do you know what just happened if there's an incident and why? So we've also identified that, though ops have their window on what's going on in live, they have their dashboards and they can see the graphs, they can see information coming in from logs, for example. Our dev teams are just moving into being able to sort of segue into that and be able to see very similar information, but we're not there yet, and there's not the full embedded understanding of what information could be captured from a product, what could be captured from an environment, what's useful. And also we're doing quite well ourselves at the moment now with access control and access auditing, because we're in a very highly regulated industry, being part of a credit reference agency. But are we testing it? And indeed, from a tester's point of view, having a little bit of extra access into an environment is really, really useful. Are we kind of letting it slide because it's going to be useful next month when we do a thing? Or do we need to correct that? So, yeah, there you go. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the ideals of operability now. So those are the problems. Let's talk about the ideals. And again, I'm talking from the perspective of someone who is an engineer, a deployment engineer, and previously a support person as well. I'm going to put the ideas out there. I know from experience that if I put those ideas out there, you, with your testing heads on, will think about how it should actually be tested. So here we go. Operability. Making software that is actually reliable and handles failure gracefully in production. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I tried to write out everything I could think of about operability. What is it? And this was drawn from quite a lot of different sources and talking to people and just stuff that was in my own head as well. Don't worry if you can't read it all, I'm going to go through it. And also I'll give you the references at the end as well. But you can see there's just a lot of different considerations. And when I talk to some of my colleagues, and indeed some people at DevOps Days, I was really interested to find out that when I mentioned this sort of stuff, there's perhaps about 30% chance that someone was going to go, oh, well, that's not what we do. It is. And it starts, of course, with documentation, testing of documentation. If that bit's not right, the knock-on effect. So we have, as you probably have as well, an acceptance into service document, which functions like as a contract between all the teams that are involved with delivering a product from idea to live. And so it's kind of written mainly by the support and ops teams, and then it's accepted by everybody else. We recognise we need to be a lot more collaborative about that. What we aren't doing at the moment, and what I've talked to some of my colleagues about, is looking at that document right at the beginning for clarity, for understanding. You think that's the same as clarity, but what I mean is, has everybody bothered to read it? Has everybody taken that in? And has it covered everything? Once you've got this amazing knowledge of operability, you're going to be able to pick it up on what might be missing there. Again, the product documentation. Ideally, we want a product that's so smooth, so easy to understand, so logical that you don't really need to ever look at product documentation, but it needs to be there just in case. So there'll be customer-facing documentation, there'll be the support documentation that the ops teams will use, and there'll be architecture diagrams as well. Again, you don't necessarily need to know all of it, but it all needs testing. Right, deployability. This is my... And of course, you've got your beautiful DevOps Unicorn that's going to take all your components seamlessly into live. Pipeline testing is something that I've started working with some of our teams on recently. And there's been a couple of things which they weren't doing, which have proved really useful. And we want the pipeline to be reliable, so you know exactly what it's going to do. no deviation. So you can't switch steps off, on and off and things like that. And everybody can see exactly what each step is doing. Because we use Octopus Deploy and Jenkins sometimes. So it's useful to have everybody, including the test teams, really understand every step of it. We want it to be repeatable, so you hit the same thing again, it will perform the same. You want it to be rapid, and you want to be able to roll it back. If there's any problem at all, you want to be able to revert to the previous version. So those are the linchpins of your deployment pipeline. You can make sure that your pipeline is working well by, before there's even a product there, create a walking skeleton, which you probably all know about walking skeletons anyway. Sometimes it's called a thin slice, where you just put a tiny little application through and make sure it deploys correctly and runs. And then you iterate until it forms into a full product. But you know, doing it that way, you know that bit of it's sorted. All you have to do then is develop your awesome product. Testing during deployment is the big thing here. Because, so we were doing a deployment to pre-prod the other day, and I said, right, can we put a load test on pre-prod while we're doing the deployment? And they said, why would you do that? We're about to deploy it to live. So we want to know, I want to see exactly if there's a dip in performance while we're deploying it, and I want to know how long it takes, because we were just doing config deployment, how long it actually takes to pick up that config. Because this is a product I hadn't worked with before. And so that was just a really useful little thing, that if you look at something from an operability perspective, you suddenly notice that something needs testing that maybe you haven't thought of. Maintainability, this is another thing which I think our product teams are getting really good at now, but it's so, so vital. Is the stuff building upon your environments over time? Is it stuff that you want at all? Is there some logging switched on that doesn't need to be there? Got to check that all those things are not building up. They're being cached away to where they need to be stored. What maintenance is needed? I've put automatic or manual there. No manual maintenance. There's plenty of stuff that needs to be done manually. Because you need a human being to apply their creativity and their innovation and their thoughts to it. Maintenance isn't one of those things. So, control. Referring back to our little issue that I mentioned before about maybe certain people have access to certain environments. If you make sure that you regularly look at who has got access to everything and reduce it down to the minimum, then you're not just protecting your environments and your software and your customers, your data, you're also protecting the individuals, because, you know, we've all been a noob. I remember my very first day at Callcredit, I was told to truncate a table, literally the first thing they asked me to do. And I was almost shaking when I did it. I mean, it was literally only a test database. I should have known that they weren't giving me access to something that was going to be disastrous, but, you know, let's make sure that we're not. So I've kind of piled these items together a little bit because they're all very much interlinked. So how much time have I got, by the way?
10 minutes.
Awesome, okay, cool. So, your monitoring, we mentioned before, this is something that's really, really important to me because, and particularly talking to you guys, the test teams, because what I would really like to see is, so the dev teams have a view of the operational monitoring, and the testers have a view of that. So your testing in live is literally your monitoring, is the same thing. Then we look at what tests we're running in the lower environments. Are we getting comparable metrics? Can we actually see how the update you did a week ago is actually performing in live? Has it degraded? Is it better than the previous thing that you deployed up there? When you look at your performance test environment or your pre-prod, is that better or worse than live? You need to get it as comparable as possible. So yeah, that's quite a big ambition that we have at the moment, to build the right dashboard. We use Elk Stack, or Elk B as it is now, and that is an ideal place to have like a single window on everything. So yeah, that's a bit of a I'd say it's a bête noire at the moment. Really, really obsessed with that idea, and I think it's going to be a really, really effective way of providing. It's not just a single window on it, it's understanding the product and how it's actually behaving in life. That single pane of glass thing is a basis for conversation with ops, and I think because we are missing that at the moment. I mean, literally, we sit on different floors from ops in our building, and I think that's that's a metaphor for how we actually do or don't communicate with them as well. So yeah, so if there's an incident, what we're looking at as well at the moment is what errors are each product generating. Are they actually meaningful? Are they even human readable? Are they going to give us a clue to which component's even failing? Step by step, we're improving that. And it's never ever going to be perfect, but if you've got an eye on operability, you probably think about, get a feedback after an incident from ops. Was there something where they hit a snag and thought, what does that mean? How can that be improved in future? Also, prerequisites for running a product. We've had a few incidents over the last year or so where there's been some sort of patch on the servers or a migration to a different environment. And when we've tried that, when we've tested it, we've had a bit of a sort of chaotic response or systems not running. We've had to roll it back and work it out. Maybe about 25% of the time it's because the actual prerequisites for running that product weren't fully understood. And I've gone to a couple of our dev teams and I've said, well, what are the prereqs for running your product? And they've said, well, we don't know. It's like, yeah, you do. And they've said, it works on my machine. So yeah, it's really good to build up a prereq. Seems like a really simple thing to have in your mind. But yeah, it's something that we should have an eye on. Again, I mentioned before having the application configuration architecture all well understood. Goes back to your documentation right at the beginning. Now, also, if you want to inspect or analyse, say there's no incident, if you want to do a sort of live test, like get some different information, are there queries that you might want to run quite regularly just to get a snapshot of something? Are those queries source controlled? Can you run them at a push of a button through a system? For example, we would run quite a few such queries through Jenkins, rather than letting someone have access with their own login, with their own credentials to a live or live-like environment. Are you using like a tool to protect your person querying from there being a problem that they've caused? If the queries are all source controlled properly, then you'll be able to understand them, improve them over time, and get the same result each time because you know you've always got the right thing. So yeah, it's all about inspection and analysing. It's quite a lot of that is the sort of stuff that you would do as test professionals anyway. It's just thinking about it from a live point of view. So, my boss really likes this diagram. You probably won't be able to read it right from here. But he's got development as being the outer circle, going from the user story at the beginning of your value stream, all the way through to having provable working code in live at this side. I think we are all guilty, and even me, having been an opsy person, of thinking that operability, which has got this green circle here, operability sits here. And what I like about his, though I've actually debated this diagram quite a lot with him, who doesn't like arguing over a Venn diagram, I do really like the way he's put testing, coding, route to live and operability all in that dev sphere. just to really emphasise the fact that you can't think about it after. It's very much inherent and ingrained in the product. So these are some of the books that I referred to to do this. I've tried to sort of make my talk a bit more anecdotal, because if you want the straight, sort of dry theory, there's plenty of books about it. You might notice that one of those is more for stress relief than anything else. But yeah, I would encourage you to have a look at all of those, not all at once, but have a look at all of those if you haven't had a chance yet. And if you'd like to have a look at my slides, please do go on my GitHub, download any of the presentation materials, and get in touch as well on Twitter if you want to have a chat about it all. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. That was awesome. Are you happy for questions? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to ask if we've got time.
Yeah, we do.
Awesome. Right. Would anybody like to talk to me?
Did you find what you...
I have found the first 6 Wookiees. Yeah. It was actually quite difficult to go back to doing my presentation after when you just... It's not just Wookiees you look for in that book, there's other characters as well, and they're often the most difficult ones to find. And there's different Wookiees, they've got different sort of bandoliers on and stuff like that. So it's very important to have your Wookiees. Any other questions?
Hi, that was very nice one. So, we are seeing a DevOps culture and DevOps model in the organization, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, we are moving to cloud architectures, right? Okay. So, how we can see the DevOps culture when organization adopt any cloud architecture in their organization, right? Maybe because cloud itself gives you here to here, right? Everything. Mm-hmm. So, whether we should continue the DevOps culture or can we implement DevOps culture on the cloud? So, how the organization will see if the organization is already in DevOps culture and the cloud is implemented.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think a lot of cloud technologies, so we're a .NET house, so we're going into Azure. We've got quite a few products already running fully in Azure. And Microsoft very gleefully have told us on many occasions that VSTS and Azure make you do DevOps in a box. And as Sophie's going to tell you in a minute, she's going to talk all about DevOps culture, and of course you can't put culture in a box. And I think you can do a DevOps transformation in terms of tech going into the cloud, and actually it's really, really compatible with DevOps. I think DevOps thinking is now so embedded in people developing cloud technologies, AWS as well. Which cloud provider are you going into?
It depends, right? So currently we are building things that can be adopted in clouds, any cloud services, whether it is AWS or Google Cloud Services. So we are not sure what is the implementation, but if you build something that can be put in a cloud, any services can adopt your things. So we can go for AWS or Google Cloud Services depending on the budget we have.
That's perfect, because I personally believe you can't have maintainability unless your platform is agnostic. So doing it that way, that's perfect. That's for me one of the essences of keeping your stuff operable in life. I think one of the other things that people are doing very well now, which is very DevOpsy in cloud, is that we are testing and automating all our environment build scripts and resource controlling those. I think that is a really, really powerful way to use tech to give you a really reliable, repeatable, rapid way of being able to spin up new environments very easily, populate them with the right software or databases, and then you find that the cultural bits, the more creative bits, can happen more freely because you've got confidence in what's underneath it. And I think, that's where the sort of two sides to DevOps to me is the automated, underpinning, reliable structure, and then you can be really sort of flowery and unicorny over the top of that.
You see that in the DevOps, the infrastructure is not there.
So we've got to cut it short there. So
Well, let's
Alex will be around
yeah.
afterwards. Yeah, cool. Can we give Alex another